So hello and welcome to Scrapbook Live. I am Megan Jacks. Today is Friday, April 18th, and I have a fun gradient layout for you. I called it the double rickrack gradient layout because in my original layout, I had used the double rickrack border maker cartridge, which is great because it gives you those two little pieces, those two strips that kind of come out, and you can use them to kind of highlight how the gradient effect works on these papers. But then when I was doing my sample today, working on it, I realized I really didn't want to use double rickrack for my layout. So if you really, really love the layout that's in the handout, just follow those directions. I'm going to use very similar directions. I'm just not going to use double rickrack. I'm going to use a strip of paper. We're going to highlight that gradient, and I'll talk about why I like that effect so much for the when you put the two-page or the gradient layout together. So I don't know how many of you got the gradient papers that Creative Memories had just recently, a couple months ago. They had the Best Hits Gradient promo paper packs, and they had like all colors of the rainbow, plus you could get the rainbow pack. But we've seen gradient papers come out in other paper packs in some form. Usually, I mean, we've seen a lot with any kind of water or uh, our Totally Tonal paper packs from a few years ago. It feels like in every single pack there was at least one gradient paper, and I think Creative Memories realized that everybody loved those gradient papers in those paper packs. So if they would just give us whole paper packs full of gradient papers, we'd be a very happy people. And one of the questions always comes down to is how do you use these tonal paper packs, the gradient paper packs? The nice thing about the gradients is if you aren't needing a gradient, the opposite side to every piece of paper in these packs is just a tonal paper pack or tonal piece of paper. It has a design on it, it has the tonal blues, greens, reds, whatever color of the paper pack is. So you've got some options in there if you're not feeling the gradient, but these are types of papers to use whenever you just basically don't want to use cardstock. So if you're seeing a designer set of paper from Creative Memories, up at the top of your paper pack, there's going to be the little circles that have the different coordinating colors. So I am using the blue gradient paper today for my paper or for my layout. And what I would be able to do is kind of keep that. I store this pack with like my blue papers. Pretty much only my tonal papers do I store outside of collections. I store those by color because I know if I'm working with a collection such as right now we have the road trip or Hit the Road collection, there is some wonderful blues in there. And if you need more blues and you don't want to just use cardstock, go to your Tonally Tonals. Go and grab those tonal papers and see what works. You might be surprised there'll be some stuff in there. So if it at the top of your paper pack, it says you can use pumpkin, you can use red, you can use canary. We've had those paper packs or those Totally Tonals in the past, the yellows, the canaries, the pumpkins. Just use those papers the same way you would cardstock. It just is going to have a little bit of texture to it and added interest. All right. So let's go ahead. I'm going to flip over to my overhead camera here to be able to show you just a quick reminder. If you need today's handout, if you're watching this live, you can go to my blog and you can just go to the Facebook Live and Scrapbook Live and you'll see the link for today. It's also, I think, in the description on Facebook. If you're watching this later on YouTube, there'll be a link in the description below that'll take you directly to the handout. All right, so I'm going to switch over here to my overhead camera and we will get started. As I mentioned, I am going to be using one of the the gradient papers out of the Totally Tonal. I'm having an issue today. One of the gradient papers out of the blue pack. And how were these? Blue gradient best hits. And here's where you can see all these lovely gradients and different textures, kind of different vibes to them. But on the opposite side to each one is going to be just a solid, or it's going to be a non-gradient tonal paper. So this one has kind of like a grid work to it. The photos that I'm going to be using today are pictures when my husband decided during COVID to give Cody a haircut. And I'm going to admit I totally messed up and I did not get a picture of the after. I think I got distracted with something else while he was doing all of this, and I went and did something different, and then I just never came back to actually getting that taken care of. So I feel a little silly putting together a layout with this that doesn't actually have kind of like the before and after that's quintessential when you get the haircut, especially the one that Dad gives you in the bathroom at home when he has not much haircutting experience. But I still thought it would be fun. And this particular layout, the way I had shown it in the handout, is I did use pretty much all vertical photos. You can see here at the bottom, I used all vertical photos. So I needed to find where I had 6 photos that were all vertical, and this fit the bill. Okay, so to get started, I did punch myself and made a border that uses the scissors the scissor border punch, and I put red handles on it because you can see here my husband has a red shirt on, and I thought that was nice to contrast with the blue. I punched that in the platinum shimmer, and then I used crimson cardstock to punch and create the handles. So just kind of FYI if you're wanting to do something similar, but putting the handles on the scissor punch really makes it awesome. This will be a 2-page layout. I actually already have the second page done. I wanted to make sure that I liked how everything was looking. So, but I don't want to show you that. I kind of want to reveal here what we're doing. So the gradient paper, what I really like to do with the gradient paper is I love to have pieces of it where we flip. So you can see what I did is I punched that double rickrack and then I flipped the gradient so that it's where the gradient is lighter on one end. I flipped it so the lighter end of that punched piece was in the dark end. I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm going to just do it a little bit different. And what I'm hoping you'll see from here is that there's a lot of flexibility in this overall concept, which is truly cutting pieces off, flipping them around. And what that allows you to do is sometimes it can help feel like to balance out the gradient. Sometimes a gradient by nature of having a dark end and a light end, especially when you're working with the gradient going more left to right versus top to bottom, it can feel a little unbalanced. Like I feel like we're kind of like tilting one direction here. By having a piece that gets cut off, flipped around, it kind of just helps maybe right the ship a little bit where we don't feel quite as unbalanced. We have a little bit of a darker detail, kind of just keeping things balanced, and it pulls the lighter color over to the other side. And it can just be a nice accent. The same thing if you do top to bottom like this. I think something like this, it feels we are naturally maybe feel not quite as unbalanced with it because I don't know if you're like me, I think of balance as side to side. And here both sides are the same. And this makes me think of you think of like a sky going into the ocean, right? Where it's just the light sky at the top and the dark blue ocean here at the bottom. So I think it's really prevalent when we pull it to the side that we start to feel the darker colors feel heavier and we have it, just feel like we're kind of like just being pulled to one end. So that's one reason, in my opinion, when I do something with the gradients, I like to have it be a 2-page layout because you can see here, I go from dark all the way to lighter in the middle and then come back to dark. So as a 2-page layout, it feels nice and balanced. Okay, so to get started with this, the first thing you would want to do if you're following the directions that I have is you will punch one edge with a double rickrack border punch, and that is going to give you your 2 pieces. Now, I am not using double rickrack, but I still want to have a punched edge. I use bubble punch here, and I do want to have a punched edge. I need to pick out a border maker cartridge that's going to do that for me, and I ended up going with Candy Stripe. I like Candy Stripe. I mean, it came out with a Christmas one, so we kind of think of like peppermint stripes, which, barbershops, right? But I'm not really highlighting that aspect. I think it would be really cool if I maybe did that vertical coming down and I could have highlighted it as like, home barber, but I'm not. That's not the route I'm going, but I could just if you're needing to do a layout and you wanted to highlight the fact that, you're going to get a haircut, especially like a men's barber. You think of the old school things they would have outside. So I'm going to punch along the edges of my paper, but first I need, I'm I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain this. When I punch this, you can see here better, I want to weave something into it. And I decided that I was going to weave the inside with the gradient. So what's nice about this particular gradient is if I can go ahead and punch one side of it here because I can cut everything I need from the other side. So I'm actually going to go ahead and punch one edge here because I want to show you basically how I adjusted this for myself to make it work for what I needed to do. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to punch one edge with the candy stripe. Okay, so there's candy stripe. Now what I needed to do is candy stripe, you can weave in here, just like you would with picket fence. You can do the same thing with the zebra stripe. You can do with the chevrons. You can have all sorts of fun weaving in with the border maker piece here. So what I wanted to do is I'm going to use navy. I thought I would just come in with a very dark color. What's nice about the navy is it's still darker than my darkest color here. So it will pop off no matter where it is on my paper. So I needed to measure how wide of a strip I can put in here. And I think with candy stripe, it's a little more than 5/8 of an inch, a little bit more. So you're going to be just a little bit past 5/8 of an inch. And that's what I'm going to go ahead and cut with my trimmer. 5/8, just a little bit past 5/8 of an inch. Not going quite all the way to that next 16th inch mark, but I'm going to go ahead and cut 5/8 of an inch, or just past 5/8 of an inch. And I'm going to test it. I just want to make sure that I got the piece the right size. I want to make sure it's going to go in there. And it does look like it's going to weave pretty well. I am not going to go in every other one. I'm going to give it like a little bit of a pattern when I do it. Okay, so I like how that's going to weave in there. Now what I need to do, now that I have this width determined, I know how big it is, I'm going to take out my ruler and I'm going to look at this and determine how big of a piece do I want to put in here that's also going to give me a little bit of the navy border on either side of it. So I want to do 1/2 inch really quick. I'm going to measure my page I've already done just to make sure that's the size. I think I used 1/2 inch. Yes, 1/2 inch. So I'm going to come up here to the other edge. I'm going to cut off 1/2 inch. I need my gradient paper here. I want the gradient pattern, 1/2 inch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some adhesive and I'm going to adhere the gradient to that navy strip that I already created. And I'm just going to run it right down the middle. All right, so there you can see I've got a nice little strip there with the navy pokes. Now what I want to do is I want to lay this on there so that my gradient goes the opposite direction, or I want to weave it in. What you could do here, I could have just made a border, a thin border like this. It would just go across the top. That could have been how I did my layout. I could have done even here, varying widths. So whatever piece I could have cut 1 inch off and I could back it with 1.25 inch piece of navy and place that on my layout. What I'm looking to do here is just have a little bit of a play on how that gradient works against each other. So let me really quick show you what that would look like. If I were to have something, say I were to mount this to navy, imagine I've got my whole piece of paper like that. So I'm using a navy piece and I'm coming in and something like that. Just having a fun play upon the gradient working against each other. Yeah, Judy, you're going to have to work a little bit for this, but I cannot wait to see everybody's different ways they put this together. Your takeaway for today is cut or punch strips of your gradient away from your main body of your paper. that strip that you've cut away, reverse it, and somehow put it back on your paper. You can punch it. You could cut it off the way I've cut it. You could, you know, I'm going to weave it in here. You don't have to have, you can use it however you want, but that's really what I want you to do, is just pulling apart or cutting off piece, punching off a piece, and reverse that gradient on there. Now let's see how this looks when I start to weave it in. Because I think the weaving with some of these Border Maker cartridges is just so much fun. Just getting it in there. I'm doing it backwards. I'm like, wait a minute, why isn't this looking right? It's not highlighting anything. Thankfully, it's easy to weave. Cardstock is always going to be easier to weave into your papers than than the designer paper, just because it has a little bit of a heavier weight to it. Okay, so there you can go. You can kind of see how that looks in there. Kind of a fun design. So now what I need to do is I still want the overall height of my layout, or this piece, to be the same as in my piece here, the layout design. So I trimmed it to 10.5 inches. So what I'm going to do here is, I know I need another 1/2 inch strip because I need to be able to do the same technique. So I'm going to cut off 1/2 inch. I'm going to give myself that 1/2 inch piece that I need. So this is going to be the strip that I weave. I attached a navy cardstock, and I'm going to weave this into my candy stripe border. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here, and I need to make the overall width, which actually will be the height of my page. I need to make sure I cut that at 10.5 inches. So I'm going to come over here to 10.5, and I'm going to cut off, and I'm cutting, it looks like just shy of a 1/2 inch, which should be about right. The next step will be to go ahead and punch the candy stripe again. And this is going to give me my top and bottom. All right, so I've got my candy stripe punched. I need to cut another piece of navy, another strip of navy that is just a little bit over 5/8 of an inch. That's going to be what I weave into my candy stripe. This is my piece of the gradient paper. I'm going to adhere it to my navy cardstock, just repeating the same steps that I did for the other side of this paper, the other edge. And it's going to get woven in the same way. Oops, it looks like my navy cardstock is going to be a little wide. This could be interesting. I cut this piece of navy, this strip of navy, just a little wider, I think, than I did my other one. So it's going to be a little bit more of an effort to get it woven in. It's going. All right, there we go. I got it woven in, and now you can see the full effect. So of course, when you have the gradient, especially a gradient that is evenly spread over a 12-inch, the length here, the middle, you can see that basically that medium tone never quite gets reversed. However, it still looks pretty awesome. You got the blue and the white, or the blue and the lighter blue. So it does have that nice balance where you feel like, okay, we've got the darker color over here, but we are seeing that darker color on the other side. So it does feel a little bit more balanced, I guess. The other option I want you to think of is especially depending on the types of photos you're using and maybe the punches you're using, this layout could go the opposite direction. And what's also great about this layout is even though I make it a 2-page layout, you could just do a single page layout with this. And don't think that this technique doesn't work on other types of gradients. So we think of the gradient here as just we have blues going from light to dark. That we've had other papers that are not just single colors. That if you think back to Serene Waters, it actually had a really pretty paper in there that was like, it almost looked like some reflections off the water where you'd have all the pretty like orangey colors and then it worked its way down into some blues and into the darker blues. You can do a similar thing with that where you can flip the colors. So even if you have the rainbow gradient pack, if you have other ones that have the multicolor, you can do the same similar effect. All right, so I see Ella's asking a question that she just joined and she doesn't have the candy stripe punch, but she wants to do, I'm assuming you would like to do some weaving. Picket fence will do it. Picket fence will alter the outside edge. It's an edge style, but you can weave with picket fence. You can use the zebra stripe is a good one to consider using. You can use a chevron. You can use, I'm looking over there at them. You actually surprisingly can weave with Ancient Key. It definitely has a different effect to it, but you can weave with it. So just kind of play around with a little bit. If you're not sure, what you can do is go ahead and get out your punch some scrap paper and kind of play around with it. So next step is I want to go ahead and I do want to back these edges. In my original layout, I used some starry shimmer in there. You can see just kind of gives, for the original, I needed to back the bubbles, and that's why I used some starry shimmer in there. In this particular piece, I don't necessarily need to back it because I've got it woven in there. There's a little bit of like maybe some gaps. I mean, here I've got a little bit of gap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 1.5-inch pieces off the navy. 2 1 1/2, so 1.5, and then cut another one at 1.5. And that's going to sit behind. Now, in my handout, I recommend using, like, I think I use the wave blade. You could use a decorative blade here. This is a great way to use a decorative blade. Then what you would do is when you have your paper here, it's going to have have kind of a fun edge on the outside. I've got very straight, clean lines here. I've got the angles, I've got the border woven in. So I stuck with straight lines on here, but this is a great option if you want to use one of your the decorative blades that go with your rotary trimmer. What we want to do here is I'm going to adhere this to the here, and I'm just going to come in. You can use repo, you can use, well, if you have just a punched knockout border, such as I did with bubbles, you would just want to use the some repo adhesive. And all I want to do is I just want to maintain a balanced, even edge here. So I'm about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a generous 1/8 of an inch. And that's all I want to maintain, is make sure that it's just nice and even. So now I have that edge, the navy edge here. And I need to do the same thing on the other side. Being a little generous with my tape because I don't want the navy piece to fall off. And again, doing the same thing where I just have that even edge. You can use I'm eyeballing it, but you could use your cutting mat if you want to make sure it's nice and even. So there we go. Now we need a paper to put behind it. And in your paper pack, you've got some options if you want to stay within this same blue scheme and you just want to, you're full committing to the blues. And I did that actually in my original layout. You can't really see it, but I did use some strips of one of the other papers out of the Island Waters Totally Tonal paper pack. So what that would look like here is if I wanted to go, I could come in with some blue paper. This is out of the gradient pack. You can see it's just a different type of the gradient. It's not maybe a blended gradient as much as it has, you know, clear, clean lines between the different ones, but it is a gradient. But the reverse side is kind of nice. It's got some blue in there. It's hard to see on camera, but it's a very pale blue. I could come in and use baby blue. That would be an option to come in here with. My photos, let me show you my photos on here just to kind of giggle a little bit at how silly they are. Cody, I don't know, he's grinning at us, I guess. I think at first he was okay with the idea, and then when Dad actually got cutting, he's like, wait a minute, you're not like, I don't know. When I did this, I just wasn't 100% sure. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to bring in, I was going to do some white letters. I'm just going to use letter stickers. And then if I have my border here is going to fit in. And I just thought, well, I don't know. Is it really worth it to cut up a piece of my gradient paper to get to this tonal pattern? So what I decided to do is just use white. And the reason I decided to use white was because I'm going to use white letters, and I thought that would balance out nicely. And honestly, it just pops the page just a little bit more, makes that blue stand out even more on here. So I'm going to put this on here, just centering, and I'm going to use a full sheet of white. I could, as part of this, I think I give the directions. I tell you, you can cut a 2.5 inch, or two 1.5 inch strips of the tonal paper and back it here to do your edges if you don't want to use a full sheet. This white paper is out of the top loading pages. I have a lot of it, like a lot. So I'm just going to make this easy and just mount this to the paper. I'm not going to worry about cutting and trying to save paper. If I was using a designer paper, like a tonal paper that I only have a couple sheets of, I absolutely would cut down a piece. I could come in here and use a designer paper that has more of a pattern to it if I really wanted to. So if that fits in with your theme, you're using maybe more of a tonal thing up here, but whatever theme you're doing, you could come in with something a little more flashy at the bottom and the top. So keep that in mind if you want to. What's nice is you can plop that piece of paper down here and set this on top and kind of do a dry fit and see what you think. Maybe by the time you've added any of your details with your punch materials, you've put on your photos, you may say, you know what, I don't need any more at the bottom or at the top. I just need something simple, solid, tonal, low contrast. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and add some adhesive and get this whole thing stuck down to this paper. And I'm going to be about a half, just a little more, well, it should be a 1/2 inch off the top and the bottom. Oh no, it's a little less than 1/2 inch because I added the blue. I'm like, wait a minute, my paper is 10.5 inches. Why is this not working? It should be 3/4 inch. And it doesn't work because I added the blue, the navy. Just trying to get it evenly on here. That looks pretty good. Now, what I want to show you is the second page that goes with this, because as I mentioned, I already made the second page because I wasn't going to go into this not knowing what I was doing. There was no way you guys wanted to see me fumbling around trying to figure out how this needed to look. So here we go. Here is the page, and I will fully admit, guys, I did not need to make this a 2-page layout. These pictures are heavily repetitive. It really should have just been a single page layout, but I think the gradient effect comes into play better when it goes all the way across. I like having the dark meeting in the middle with the light. You can see how the darks meet in the middle here. I'm gonna have my scissors are gonna come across. I have a little bit of cleanup to do on the scissors. That was a whole effort. And the smiling kid in here. So the photos are gonna sit in like this. It's just gonna come across. In my original layout I showed you guys, I had used the corner rounder to do just something a little bit fun and a little bit different. You can see how that worked out. Here's all of those across. It was a really fun detail. I would show you guys that layout, but it is pictures of my middle child taking a bath. And so just not something I want to have out when they were like 18 months old. They're super young, but it's not just something I want on the internet. So I just showed you guys some placement holders, but they are punched to that. They're super cute that way. I just didn't think it was needed for these pictures. So I'm going to keep my photos down a little bit from the top, and I'm going to be able to come in. I'm going to use I think I'm going to use Collegiate. And I tested to make sure that I would have enough space. And like I grabbed an H. I'll use an H in here, and I think that's going to look fine across the top. So once I get all my photos on, and I need to make a decision because somewhere in here I do need to do some journaling. So I need to make a decision if I'm going to cut one of these photos a little bit down. The photos here on the right are loosely attached. They're not completely, so I could take this one where he's kind of squatted down a little bit more, and I could cut it, but then I would need to maybe put it in the middle if I wanted to have a spot for some journaling like I did in my original layout there. So I've got to consider that, and I think I will do that. I'm going to go ahead and crop this photo down just a little bit. Use my photo trimmer to do that. I'm going to take it down. I think I can come down about maybe 4.5, like to 4.5 inches tall. All of my photos are trimmed to 3 3/4 inches wide. I left them at 6 inches tall. But now I want to bring this one down. I'm going to bring it down to 5 inches first and see how I like that. I don't want to cut too much of my husband's hands off, but I need more than 1/2 inch to journal. I didn't even bring that down to 5 inches. That was like 5 1/4. Photo trimmer is so good for this, just shaving off little bits when you're trying to like dial in where you want. I say that every time. I just love it. There we go. So then what if I want, I have a small piece of baby blue cardstock, just a scrap, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to measure, and I think I need it to be for sure, it needs to be 3 3/4 inches wide. That's how wide my pictures are. And then I want it to be, where's my ruler? I want it to be, I think just over 1 inch tall. I am going to be able to get just not a lot of journaling in this, just a little bit. I mean, that's okay. I don't have a whole lot to say other than, well, I guess I would have more to say if I put out the whole story. So we'll see. A 1 inch piece is really hard to get on the trimmer. I will admit that. 1 inch on there is difficult. I can get a 1 inch strip out of this much easier off of my regular trimmer. And it could sit up there. Actually, well, I might adjust that because I did it in the baby blue, but remember I mentioned I'm going to use blue, I'm going to use white stickers. So I might want to use white cardstock there. Before I get too much further, I am going to go ahead and put on my photos. And my photos are about 3¼ inches up from the bottom. So I'm going to use my T-square to help me align my photos, get my photos placed. And then I'll add my scissor border. So 3¼ inch from the bottom. Make sure your background page is square on your layout or on in your cutting mat first. And then place your outside photos first. Get those and then place your middle photo so you can center it. So I'm making sure that my outside photos have the even margin on both sides, and then it's easy for me to come in the middle and put that middle photo in place, centering the spacing. All right, so now I'll come in and add my scissor border, and I'll be pretty much done except for adding the title. I do need to add the title, and I'll do that off camera. I'll put my, when I add the titles like that, I use the multi-purpose tool to grab my letters. I will use my T-square to help me line things up. My navy border is sticking out a little bit. Just trim up that edge. So there we go. Super fun layout. I got to figure out the journaling situation here. As I mentioned, I'm going to use white stickers. So I might balance that out by using some of the white cardstock instead of the blue. I could also bump this up and put my journaling down here. I don't know. I've got to figure it out. The other thing for this particular one, because I have a lot to say, what I can actually do is I could journal, or I could go into Canva, which is a graphic design. It's a free app or whatever you can use. And I can go into Canva and I could create a 4x6 canvas, and I could type it out what I want to say, and I could just print that on a piece of cardstock. I could print it. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could print it on my photo printer onto a piece of photo paper. I've never done that. It would be actually pretty interesting to do, especially that small of a piece. I could actually I could combine it with a 4x4 photo. So that could be an option. Mary's asking, where can you find a T-square tool? The T-square is, you can find it at almost any craft store. The size that I use is going to be part of probably if they have like a drawing area. You can also find it on Amazon. That's probably the easiest because it just gets delivered to your door. So that's, a great option there to do. The T-square is delightful. You definitely, I really enjoy having a T-square on this. So that's pretty much what I have for you guys today. Hopefully you had a chance or have a chance to put it together. And if you can, share with us what you create. You can do that in the Scrapbooking with Meggan group and use the hashtag that's at the bottom of your handout. And yeah, I'm very excited for this. Get another page done. I've got a busy weekend coming up, so I'm not sure I'm going to get any scrapbooking done. But then next week, I'm going to be in Mexico. So I will not have a scrapbook live next week. So I'm so sorry for that, but I will have something the week following. So May 2nd, that's the day we will get together. And I'm leaning towards that the first Friday of each month is going to be when I try to work on the monthly page from the previous month. So we will see if I can round up a bunch of photos. We got a very busy weekend planned between Easter and a barbecue with some friends. So I'll have some great photos from that. Will be really good. And then of course, the trip to Mexico will probably be several pages in and of itself. So, all right, thanks for joining me. If you came in late and you missed the first part of the episode, I will have this posted to YouTube later and get that link shared on Facebook as well. All right, thanks for joining me. I look forward to seeing you all soon.